All right. It's on the gavel. We'll call this meeting, the Land Use and Planning Committee, to order. This agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk on the 19th day of August, 2021. Notice was sent to the West Bend Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Roll call, all the supervisors and Mr. Strupp are here. We'll stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Because we have a public hearing this morning, we'll adjust the agenda such that that item is first. Will the clerk please read the notice?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held at a meeting of the Washington County Land Use and Planning Committee in room 1019 of the Washington County Government Center, 432 East Washington Street, West Bend, Wisconsin, on Thursday, August 26, 2021. At 7:30 a.m., there will be heard and considered the petition of Garrett Wolf for a conditional use permit for associated filling, grading, and excavating of greater than 15,000 feet within 300 feet of the ordinary high water mark of a stream for construction of a wildlife pond in a shoreland wetland zoning district. Location is part of Northwest Southeast, part of CSM 3609, Lot 2 of Section 19, Town of Erin, T3040300G, address 1086 Limerick Lane, Hartford, Wisconsin, 53027, dated this 30th day of July, 2021.
Thank you. Mr. Backhouse, will you give us a briefing on the project, please? Thank you.
Hello, there we go.
You're live.
Well, the Wolves they're looking at digging about a 1 acre pond, kind of in a wetland area on the end of their property. It's going to be about 5 feet deep, kind of gentle side slopes. They're going to be taking material will be either hauled off site, probably the better topsoil that can be used by the contractor on another site, or the stuff they can't haul off site will be kind of used in an upland area, placed on the side of a hill, stabilized and with proper erosion control below that. They've already received their DNR permit, which dictates kind of a lot of it can only be 5 feet deep and have more gentle slopes. They already obtained their erosion control and permit from the county, from our office, for disturbing over 1 acre and for the areas in the upland where the spoil would be placed. That's kind of the quick and the dirty of the project. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to ask.
All right, thank you, sir. With that, we'll declare this hearing open, entertain any comments or questions regarding the project. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak or address this? Yes, ma'am. Please identify yourself and use the microphone.
I'm Nina Wolf, Garrett Wolf's wife. I'm here to just say that I'm the property owner here and worked with Paul Siebel with the project as well. And if there's any questions, I'm here to answer them. Other than that, just what you've stated is our plan for the project.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, miss. Is there a motion and second to bring the conditional use permit to construct a wildlife pond as presented for Garrett and Nina Wolf in the town of Erin? We need a motion and a second to bring it to the floor. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. We will now close this public hearing. We will now close this public hearing. We will now close this public hearing. The hearing is closed. Now, is there a motion and second to bring this to discussion at the floor, please?
Make a motion to discuss.
Supervisor Krebs,
Second.
Supervisor Gallitz. Any comments or questions? Supervisor Gallitz.
Thank you. Just one question. So with the DNR approval, all the wetland considerations and credits or whatever, there's nothing that we're concerned about from a county perspective.
answer that.
Mr. Beckhouse?
Is the DNR permit is for a wildlife pond. And for if you go 5 feet or less in depth, they consider that still functioning as a wetland. If you go deeper than 5 feet, they say that's no longer a wetland, and that's really different permits. That dictates why the pond can only be 5 feet deep.
Got it. Thank you. That addressed my concern.
Any other comments and questions from the supervisors? Or Mr. Strout?
Is there water that's gonna pass through this, that's gonna maintain its level?
Or, I mean, you get a year like this, it's gonna dry up and,
This isn't a kind of a, their house is built kind of on the side of the hill, then it comes into a flat area.
Yep.
And there's probably like 200 or 300 feet of flat area before it goes into a ditch.
Mhm.
And that flat area is mostly just like a reed canary, kind of that marsh game that you're used to probably cut in a few spots. And that's where they're just digging a big bowl into the ground.
oh, okay.
So if the ditch would flood out at all, it probably would flood a little bit into this.
Mhm.
And then probably stay full till eventually it recedes and some of it goes away. But
Okay.
based on where it is, I'm assuming something like this will hold water most of the year and be pretty full.
Oh, okay. Other questions or comments? Hearing none, then we'll now vote to approve the conditional use permit to construct a wildlife pond. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Then the permit is granted. Did we follow that procedure properly? Okay. All right. Now with that, now we'll move on to the consent agenda. And I would just want a couple comments, please. While we too often dismiss these items in our regular discussion, we do want to note to these organizations and thank them for the time they put into preparing these reports. They are read and the information is noted. There's also a lot of background as to the actual functioning of our county government in ways that directly affect our citizens and give us quick snapshots of what's going on behind the scenes. Thanks to all of you who put work into these presentations. And yes, Ms. Arcade, we do appreciate the new format for the extension group. Cindy's not here this morning. Perhaps she's watching. So with that, we'll go to the discussion items. I'm sorry. We need a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda. Mr. Gallitz? Ms. Schulteis?
Chair, I did have a quick
Yes,
question.
yes, I'm sorry, sir. Yes.
On the planning parks monthly update. On the planning parks update, just curious, how are we against budget, knowing that we had material and labor costs that have been goofy across the country? Do we have a sense of how close we are to our plan? And if you don't have it, that's fine.
Are you referring to the cabin project?
Yes, sorry, I should have restated that. We have the tiny cabin builds out at Heritage. It's just curious how we're coming in against plan.
I can get we can get that information from Logan as it relates to as of today. When we bid out that project, because it did go out for bid, it was on the very high end of what we had presented the committee. If you remember the range of material costs plus labor. So we awarded the bid kind of on the high end, and I know that there has been some change order type supply shortages. The project's delayed. It's likely that the cabins do not get rented this fall, possibly the end of fall, but we're just so unsure of the windows have been a holdup. So we've been experiencing some of that with that project.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda? With that, we'll have a motion and a second for consent agenda. Yeah. I'm sorry? We got that. All right. And then we'll vote on the consent agenda. I'm sorry. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Now we'll move on to the discussion items. The municipal separate storm water system presentation will not be presented today. That's got to be moved to the September 23rd meeting. And at this time, we had expected Mr. Stern was going to give us an update on the activities at Fair Park. Jamie, do you want to give us an update or do that briefing or
Sure.
we waiting for
Yes,
Brad?
so Supervisor Mary and I thought it would be a good idea to put this on the agenda, just to start kind of giving you guys updates. And there's really two prongs of this update. One, which right now Attorney Stern is handling, with Eagles Entertainment Group. So unfortunately, I don't have an update on that. But we can make sure that we continue to kind of provide that. But I know that they've been moving slowly on that and taking things in, so we can get that updated at a future point. On the AIS side, though, that's the side that I've already been handling. I went to the first Agriculture Industrial Society Board meeting in August, as a representative of the county. That went very well. Not a lot happened. The fair was sort of the big update that they reported. So they had a very, very good year. They were basically reporting that on Saturday night, there was roughly 21,000 people in attendance on Saturday. And I think they had 79,000 in attendance total for the duration of the fair. And so compared to 2018 and 2019, they were reporting higher revenue. Just find that number. So they talked a little bit just about in general, kind of that was really positive for the year. After that meeting, so again, there wasn't a whole lot reported there. They talked a little bit about how the facilities staff had resigned. So the facilities manager and the facilities assistants gave their 2 weeks shortly after the fair. And so she reported on the new hires that are starting out at the fair in September related to the facilities positions. So that's kind of, I think, what the high recap from the meeting was. Following the meeting, I had some discussions with Kelly, with Phil, who's the chair, and with Pete Rutler, who's one of their longtime board members, about the process for starting kind of a strategic business planning process on the AIS board. It looks like where that's at is that they would like to convene the executive committee of the AIS board to discuss possible facilitators and processes for that in order to kind of present a recommendation to their board. So I know we talked a little bit about EDWC as well as UW Extension being options that they might discuss. So that's kind of the process of where that's at. And I'm following up on that again. So hoping that they're going to keep those meetings moving in a timely manner. So that's kind of the update of what I have. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. Otherwise, it's part of my goal that this committee, I'm excited about if they actually start on that process, because one of the things I'm going to be asking is, do we have those questions in advance for, when they're talking mission, vision, goals, objectives, things they want to see happen out here, so that we have a chance to potentially talk about that. And I can kind of capture that input as part of that process. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do. It doesn't sound like it's going to be quick. So just that's kind of the update that I have, if there's any questions.
Mr. Gallantz.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Ludovic, when you mentioned, I guess, some assistance, is that also, because strategic planning is just that, and most people aren't comfortable with the process, they're not familiar, and to set them on a good path, will they undergo some, consultative training on best practice? Because doing a goal statement and a strategic planning 3 or 5 year, it's also financial awareness, it's, market conditions, it's, all of that.
Yep. And so I know for those reasons that our position is that we'd like them to consider Economic Development Washington County's consultative services. During that discussion, it did come up that they would also like to talk about, other firms potentially, or other avenues, depending on what type of a process they wanted. So it ended with, evaluating facilitators at the executive committee level is sort of where that conversation ended.
So they're all amenable to, what we don't know is what we don't know, right? So if we
Right.
have a facilitator come in, help ensure that, intended goals are met and it's successful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think absolutely. I think it's more of a question of right now of who. And I know that at a minimum, I would think at least EDWC will be entertained as an option.
Supervisor Gallantz, I agree with you totally. The group out there, this is something that when I was on the admin committee, we had asked for 2 or 3 years in a row. Where's your 3 to 5 year marketing plan? What are you going to be when you grow up? And I think they do need some assistance, and hopefully EDWC can provide that. If not that organization, someone else. My experience with working with AIS people, you've got a great bunch of people, but they're not necessarily marketing professionals. And how well they really understand the entertainment business, I don't know. So I think they do need some outside guidance, and hopefully they'll admit to that and bring in some outside consulting services for that purpose. I had hoped Attorney Stern would be here this morning because he was going to give us another briefing, an additional briefing on some other things happening out at Fair Park, because that leads into our closed session later this morning. But perhaps if Mr. Stern shows up, we can ask him to give us some briefing prior to that time. So
You can go see if he's here. 'Cause he might have forgotten that we had asked him to give a verbal.
moving on to the action items. Thank you, Ms. Ludovic. Moving on to the action items, our first item will be a resolution grant application of $1 million to the EPA. And Ms. Silsky, can you give us a brief update on that, please, or an overview?
So this resolution just allows the county to apply for fiscal year 2022 assessment grant. And in the past, those have been $600,000. And they've been announcing that it could be upwards of $1 million for the assessment funds. The county just closed out our fiscal year 2017 assessment grant. So we are no longer in any kind of grant with EDPA right now for assessment work. We do have a revolving loan fund that we are just getting started on.
Question, this $1 million, are there any projects right now that are more or less kind of earmarked and say, boy, if we got this grant, we would do this, or are those
Yeah.
just kind of sitting in, are those just kind of sitting in limbo until, or are there other projects that would perhaps not happen if we don't get this grant?
Actually, with our fiscal year 14 grant, we completed a countywide inventory process of potential redevelopment sites, brownfield sites throughout the county. And there were over 100 parcels that were identified throughout the county, and we're diligently and have been working with our local governments for the last 6 years and funding the assessment for those sites. And those sites have been prioritized by the site redevelopment committee, and in conjunction with our coalition members throughout the county. So there are sites that we have to specify in that grant application that are priority for our local governments for redevelopment.
Do you have optimism that we will achieve getting this grant? Or is that
I
kind of a
am
rubber
always
stamp thing, or are there
Yes.
some competition for those monies?
It is a nationwide competition. It is very tough competition. We did not get the last fiscal year 2021 grant, but we did do a debriefing with the EPA, and we talked about ways that we can improve the grant. Essentially, we have 7 coalition members, and the grant requires that we describe a redevelopment site for each one of our coalition members, but we're only allowed 10 pages. So, and each one has to have a story. And so when talking with the EPA, we were talking about how we could really describe a good story for each one of these sites in such a short amount of space. So I thoroughly described the process that we've gone through and the coalition on all the successes that we've had. So.
Supervisor Krebs, do you have some comments or questions?
Yes, both. Leave it up to the EPA to make us literary majors, I guess. Question being, in the title of the grant, it says assessment grant. This can be used for obviously assessing the sites, but also this grant money can be used towards the actual remediation of the sites too, correct? Or what specifically?
Yeah,
Where is the money
it's
used?
for assessing the properties. So it's a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental site assessment. It basically identifies if there's contamination and if there is, where it is and what it is. And then we're also allowed to do remedial action plans, which will describe how to remediate the contamination on the site, how to do it, how much it might cost. And then we can also do redevelopment planning, which has been used like in Richfield and Jackson. And that does not allow for the actual remediation. That's why we got the revolving loan fund to help municipalities and developers fund remediation. So the assessment grant is really the initial component of redevelopment of just determining what's on the site and how to redevelop it.
Okay. Other question I had is, there's 100 sites that have been identified, prioritized. Is that a limiting list, or as new owners pop up, can those be added or jumped forward on the list further?
Yep, things have been added, and then we have also reprioritized sites as new sites are coming on board.
Okay,
So, yep.
thank you.
Mr. Gallitz.
An extension of Supervisor Krebs' question. So that reprioritization, is it also weighted based upon, I guess, severity or impact, or also aligned with development plans that are being considered? They're either in part of or adjacent to, the property. I'm
Yeah.
assuming so.
Yeah, actually, we do have quite an extensive process in prioritizing those sites. We look at economic factors, like is there a developer that is interested right now in that site? That shoots it high on the priority list for the site redevelopment committee. We also look at the environmental factors. Is the site highly contaminated? Is this a site that is having impact on the surrounding neighborhood? Is this something that really needs to be addressed right away? And then we also just look at the resources of the local government that we're partnering with. Do they have the resources and the wherewithal to help shepherd a redevelopment process through? Or is it something that like the EDWC or the county needs to kind of help that local government with this redevelopment? So there's a lot of factors that we look at in the prioritization process.
Last question, you mentioned 2014, the 100 some lists. So from then till now with other assessment grants, and the assessment is to get a better understanding of true contaminants. We started with a list with some general understanding of brownfield sites, right? Then we get the assessment grant funds and we can get a better determination. Typically, how has that changed? Meaning, did we get surprises that it's worse or it's less than what we thought?
Like the number of sites?
No, the contaminants in the site.
Oh, on each individual site? Well, the inventory that we completed did not identify the actual contamination of the site. It is the potential for contamination on the site.
Right.
So
then with that assessment grant, when we actually get a sense of what it is, do we get surprises, or are we pretty close to our estimate of?
well, there are usually surprises.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other comments and questions for anyone? Procedurally, I got out of line a little bit. We should have had a motion and a second to have the discussion. Mr. Krebs will make that motion. Ms. Schulte seconds it. Are there any other questions or comments regarding this resolution? If not, then I would ask that we vote on the grant application FY 2022 US EPA Community-Wide Coalition Assessment Grant for Hazardous Substances and Petroleum Brownfields. and forward it to the county board for consideration. A motion and second, please. Mr. Krebs, I'm sorry. We got it. All right, very good. All right. The second item on the agenda is second item on our action items this morning is, I'm sorry. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Thank you. What would we do without you, Gina? Second item on is the permit for Builders Freeze Lake Pub to act as a concessionaire at Glacial Hills Park. And Ms. Silsky, do you want to give us a brief presentation on this as well? Just to understand the background is the conversation you and I had, so.
Sure, yep. So in the past, we partnered with Builders to do events at Glacier Hills Park, and they've been very successful. What this resolution does, it is a requirement by the Department of Revenue to identify Builders as the sole concessionaire at shelter number 3 at Glacier Hills Park. They all held a series of events there, and the county would be receiving the $5 entrance fee to that area. And the area in Glacier Hills is around shelter 3. There would be a fenced in area where this event would take place. Typically on the days of these events, we do allow a pass on the public coming into the park, but then they would pay that $5 fee to get into that builders area.
Thank you. Can we have a motion and second to open this resolution for general discussion? Ms. Schulteis? Mr. Balta? Any questions or comments? Mr. Gallantz?
Thank you, Chair. So you answered my one question that you said we typically wouldn't charge patrons the normal $5 park fee and the $5 entrance there. I noticed some other counties, they do require that. It's lost revenue, et cetera. So if other counties are, should we duplicate, or do we put ourselves in a better position and not? I don't know. That's I
Well,
guess it is a
I think
policy
that's-
question.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a policy question that we could be considering, but past practice has been that when we hold these public events, that we typically allow the public to come into the parks for free. So.
Okay.
And-
We held the builders events in the past. We actually charge a cover charge at the park entrance. So, but if you had a sticker, you did not have to pay. Okay, so if you were already a annual pass holder, you would not basically pay what we're gonna call like the entrance fee. So we were basically just more enforcing the entrance fee than we usually do at the time at the spot.
Right. So if you had an annual pass, you still paid the $5 to attend the special event.
You did not in the past. This time though, you would essentially, we won't be at the gate. So we went back and forth about this, about not wanting to have our staff at the gate, a link to an event. So the gate entrance, in theory, if you have a pass, you would get in. If you don't have a pass, you still could come into the park. We won't run enforcement that day. But no matter what, you're going to pay the $5 at the entrance to the event, even if you're an annual pass holder.
Yeah, yeah, regardless of annual pass holder, you would pay the $5 at that fenced in gate to that builders area.
Right. But
And
that
that's
part was clear.
$5 that would come to the county.
Right. Thank you. That part was clear. For the permit, what's the duration? Is this open-ended? Is it reviewed every year?
1 year.
1 year, okay.
I wasn't clear. So is that called out in the, okay.
In
Thank
the
you.
resolution. Yeah, it's very strict. I did not like the resolution because I thought it was really limited. And it has to be that way. And I just want to throw a bone to the county attorney's office and their assistant county attorney, Eileen, and Brad's team, because we've been working on this item since the last series of builders events, which I think was 2 years ago, in terms of how to make this, those types of things possible out at that park. So.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it. I think it's a great idea. And if it draws more people to our parks and they come back, then, great. So since you mentioned Attorney Stern, the other question I had was, hold harmless liability, those type of things. I'm assuming all that has been addressed to our satisfaction.
Yeah, and the way this stuff works, first of all, we have all kinds of immunities when it comes to this stuff, but this is very state statute specific. We weren't thrilled either, quite frankly, with the resolution in terms of how basic it is and so forth, but we wanted to make sure that we really hit everything the state needs in it so that we can make that application and this is all falls under chapter 125 of the Wisconsin statutes. We can't hold a license on our own. That's why we need to bring a concessionaire in, and it's all very specific as to how we have to do this. So we're just sort of following that roadmap in the statutes.
Okay, so the reference to your permit is, whereas under state law to county, et cetera, that's where that's covered. So not specifically called out in the resolution.
Correct.
Any other questions or comments?
So this, if it's if this happens annually, this committee would have to renew this resolution annually, would be my assumption.
I'm not sure that we need to do a resolution again, once we've designated them as a concessionaire.
Is to sign a 1-year contract. The resolution doesn't say to sign multiple 1-year contracts.
Right, I think there's an extension period we can apply for is what I was getting at, but again, it's all very state statute specific.
Okay, and would this apply to any other functions or events that happen on county property? I don't attend many of them, but I know there's a beer garden that moves around between the different parks and stuff. Would that also have to be applied for?
This is a different type of license. What's going to happen is they become the concessionaire for that shelter area number 3 and that particular vicinity. And that's in part why there's going to be a fence around there, because in order to get a license like this, you designate a certain portion of the park as a premises that this license covers. And they'll have the exclusive right to sell the alcohol on that particular premises. You can't bring alcohol into it and you can't take alcohol out of it. That's why it's got to be fenced off, and that's what the license encompasses. The other beer gardens we've done, we have the right to have those places come in and do that. This is a little bit of a different type of situation.
The difference being what, that this is more semi-permanent versus the temporary nature of the other ones?
When we bring someone in, like for example, when we did Black Husky Brewing, they have a special kind of liquor license. I think it's a Class B, if I want to say, that allows them to sell alcohol off premises. Builders doesn't have a license like that. So in order for us to be able to get them into the park, we have to designate them as our concessionaire to sell. So it's a little bit of a different situation.
Once Bill gets this license, then do they have to order operations? Then do they have to go back to the local municipality for for a seller's license too, or no?
No, that's just through us. It's similar to what we're doing, quite frankly, with the Fair Park in the town of Polk. In that situation, town of Polk went through this almost exact same process with the folks at the Rave and the Eagles Club. Here, because it's the county park, we're the ones doing it.
Okay.
The other permits are brewers have a special exemption, which allows them a traveling location. Like if you have a brewery license as a micro brewer under the state law. So that's kind of the difference.
I turned off. So basically, if I'm understanding or assuming this right, on county property, really local municipal liquor licenses don't apply. It's only state beverage, beer and liquor licenses are what are required.
Yeah, we can't hold one is the issue. And so there's no exception for us in the law that allows us to hold a license. That's why we have to designate builders as a concessionaire. But that's what I was getting at, as Jamie mentioned, some of these breweries, they have these off premises license they can go around. And even in those situations, I think they can only have one beer garden going on at one time. You can't do 5 at once on a Saturday. And so in this situation, because we can't hold that license ourselves, we have to bring in a concessionaire.
So the beer gardens are really limited to license holders of a brewery license holder.
Depends who you go with and how you do it. Yeah.
Because a traditional local restaurant in the area, if they have a liquor license, that doesn't really segue onto county property until they would go and obtain a concessionaire license.
Yeah, we would have to designate them to be our concessionaire, and then they would apply through the state to get that license.
Just that we're doing right now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then we'll vote to approve the resolution authorizing the application of an airport/public facilities permit and appoint Builders Freeze Lake Pub as concessionaire at Glacial Hills Park, County Park, and forward to the County Board of Supervisors for their consideration. All in favor, say aye. Oppose? Then the resolution is passed. Now, Mr. Stern has joined us, so we're going to go backward on the agenda just a little bit. Prior to the discussion, before we getting into the closed session this morning, I'd ask Attorney Stern to give us a bit of an update on what is happening at Fair Park, because the closed session is directly relevant to his comments to us this morning.
So Fair Park, a lot going on and a lot of changes and things out there ever since we ended up signing the contract and getting involved with our friends over at the Raven Eagles Club. And as you probably know, the concert industry is still a little bit hit and miss, touch and go right now. You're probably seeing in the news all kinds of tours now rethinking whether or not they want to be out on the road and whether they want to be engaging performances in front of large crowds. Garth Brooks, for example, canceled his tour recently and so on. I think the Pixies just pulled out of Summerfest, for example. In speaking with the Rave and the ownership over there, what they have spent the summer doing so far, they brought architects and engineers out to Fair Park. They've been out there almost weekly, starting to take a look at the improvements and the changes that are going to be made out at the Fair Park. We had a meeting, Josh and I and Mr. Balistreri, must be about 2 weeks ago or so, where we started going over some of the initial plans and how the seating will be configured, what changes, if any, might be made to the stage and so forth. There was some hope we might have a show or two out there yet this year, but as we pushed on through the summer, I think in speaking with Mr. Balistreri, his position on it was, you really want to get this off and running properly, and you want to make sure that when you first start bringing people out to shows, you're doing it right, and you're creating an experience that people are going to really enjoy. And rather than try to push something through this summer where we're really not quite ready, we really are looking into 2022. He's got, as I understand it, several offers out right now for shows that may be coming, some rather big tours, as a matter of fact. Nothing that he's prepared or we're prepared to announce publicly yet, but I think some exciting things brewing out there. We took a look at some of the plans he has. I think the next steps are we're going to be meeting again in the next couple of weeks or so to start talking about timelines and timeframes and funding and things like that. But that's the reason I really haven't seen anything develop out there yet this year in terms of concerts. The more we thought about it, he thought about it, it just didn't make a lot of sense to try to push something through. Even at his facility downtown in Milwaukee, he's concerned about certain shows actually being able to happen and go off the way they should. So this summer has been basically in the planning stages yet, and we're hoping that next year we start seeing the performances out there.
Mr. Stern, do you anticipate we're going to see any kind of construction activity out there yet this year?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet.
Okay. Other comments or questions for the attorney? All right, hearing none. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Sure.
We've got 2 meeting dates coming up to put on your calendars. Wednesday, September 15th at 4 p.m. That will be a joint meeting immediately preceding the executive committee meeting. And I believe the discussion at that point in time is going to be status on the golf course properties. And our regular scheduled meeting, which will be Thursday, September 23rd at 7:30 a.m. With that, we're going to go into a closed session. I'll entertain a motion to convene in a closed session. We need a motion. Mr. Gallitz, Mr. Boltman. All right. We'll vote aye. Mr. Strupp.
Aye.
Mr. Gallitz, Mr. Murray says yes. Mr. Krebs, Mr. Boltman.